Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see some familiar faces and some new folks for this very nerdy, detailed webinar on case notes, case tags, casework data, all of the fun stuff that actually makes up good casework. So, if you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ann Meeker, a managing director at POPVOX Foundation. I am a former caseworker, a former casework manager, and have been part of the team behind our Casework Navigator program here at POPVOX Foundation for the last few years. We are, if you're unfamiliar with us, we are a completely nonpartisan 501c3 team of former congressional staffers who just can't quit Congress. Our work focuses on helping Congress and helping legislatures around the world keep pace with rapid changes in technology and society. And a huge part of that is recognizing, uplifting, and supporting the wonderful work of caseworkers and the work that they do. So, as I said, today we are here to talk about cases, case notes, case tags, and casework data. Today we have a meeting instead of a webinar because I really want to make sure that this is as collaborative as possible. There is no one perfect way to manage your case notes. So I think there's a lot that folks here can learn from each other. So please, I know we have a lot of people today, and I'll play traffic cop if I need to, but please just feel fully empowered to jump into the discussion, unmute yourself, comment, provide suggestions, tell us what's working for you, flag a question that maybe we can crowdsource and answer for you today. So let's keep this informal and we'll carry right along. I will flag for folks that we are recording the first part of this today. So we're going to record my presentation and some of our kind of higher level discussion, and then we're going to try to save time at the end for more detailed Q&A. We have a few examples that we can workshop of kind of sample constituent intake that we can workshop together to just talk about how we would write case notes for these examples. So that part will not be recorded. So if there's a detailed question that you are not comfortable having recorded, we will have time at the end for that, but just want to make sure that everyone is clear on our ground rules here. So let me go ahead and I will get my slide deck going. Okay. Cool. So I know we still have folks coming in, but I am just going to get started because we have a ton to cover and not a ton of time today. So as we've said, we are talking about case notes and data. What I want to do is try to give folks a little bit of a high-level structure for thinking about the types of data, the types of things that are important to capture in a case note, and why are they important. I am huge on this just as a general philosophy for managing and doing this kind of work, that knowing the why and for how this kind of information can be used is one of the most critical pieces for help for you to understand what's important to capture. And then also, if any of you guys are casework managers, ask that in a second, for casework managers to really understand what's happening and help your team build the good habits of writing great case notes. We're going to talk along the way about some habits that make that kind of work sustainable. I know one of the hardest parts, again, I know from experience here, one of the hardest parts of managing casework is just keeping your casework practices and those case note practices sustainable over time. So we're going to talk about just how to build that into your workflow. And then, as I said, we're going to wrap up with some group workshop time. I will also flag we do have a guest speaker for today. So I'm very delighted to have Ananda Bhatia, who's actually a former colleague of mine, but she's now at House Digital Service, will join us to talk a little bit about the big picture for casework data and how it helps Congress as an institution learn from casework. So we'll get to that in a second, but I just wanted to take a second at the beginning to say welcome, Ananda, and thank you so much for joining us. Cool. Okay. So let's take a second as we get started here. If folks are comfy, I would love to have us jump over and share a little bit about who's joining us today. So if everyone's not familiar with Mentimeter, you can go to menti.com. So we want this to have the option to be anonymous, so you're welcome to participate anonymously here. So if you go to menti.com and drop in this code at the top here, 356054443, that will let you go ahead and answer these questions so that we can see who's here. Wonderful. So just to be clear here, I think part of the issue with consistency in case notes and part of the challenge of case notes is clearly there are a lot of different people and a lot of different roles on any congressional office team who are all responsible for that huge team project of keeping good case notes. So I'm delighted to see a bunch of caseworkers. I'm excited to see casework managers. I am going to talk a lot about your role in this today. And then some other staff, welcome. If you are not a caseworker, please feel very welcome. We're excited to have you here too. We'll try to make sure that we explain this well enough. But again, if you need to stop me at any time to ask a clarifying question, please do. Again, one thing that we really talk about also is the challenge of keeping case notes consistent, especially when there is the kind of massive casework surge moment. So the government shutdown or the Afghanistan withdrawal, the pandemic, a natural disaster, whatever that case may be, when everyone in the office gets pulled into casework. So part of what I want to talk through today and make sure that our other staff joining us, what you come away from is just that basic sense for if I am pulled into support on casework, these are the basic principles behind making sure that I can keep those case notes as detailed and helpful as possible. Okay, so thanks so much for doing that one. And let's move along. For the folks who are caseworkers and who are casework managers, I would be so curious to hear how long you have been doing this work. And again, folks, please feel free. If you have comments, want to expand on any of these answers, please feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in.
Actually, I think first time.
Perfect. So I know this is also part of the challenge here too, is that if you've been doing casework for a long time, your experience of the CRM platforms that you use to manage casework has also changed. And also probably maybe you've been through multiple offices, you've been through multiple kind of regimes for how you do casework. So also thinking over the course of your career, how do you learn to keep good case notes? How do you keep that process consistent? And then also how do you evolve that process is a huge part of the big challenge here. Cool. So we have quite a spread from folks who've been doing this for over a decade to quite a few here who are new to casework. So again, all of these perspectives are incredibly valid and helpful as we're talking about these best practices. So folks, again, please just jump in with your perspectives and thoughts. Okay. And then last but not least, here, well, two more questions here, and then we'll move into my presentation here. Tell me about your CRM. So I know we have folks here from both the House and the Senate, so there are different options available to both sides. IndiGov is House only for now. Voice is Senate only for now. So talk to me about who are you using? This is going to be a little bit of a challenge for us today, just knowing that each CRM manages its kind of data collection features for cases a little bit differently. So some of what we're going to talk through today, I would love y'all's perspective on just how to adapt it to your particular CRM, because knowing that there are some different limitations and opportunities for all of these. Okay, looks like we have quite a few IndiGov, which is super interesting and helpful, and then quite a few IQ. Bless IQ, the old casework workhorse. We love it. I was in IQ office. Super, and a couple Fireside. Fireside, thanks so much for joining us. All right, and no one is going to pop in with like a surprise CRM that I didn't know about yet. Good to know. Cool. Okay. And then last but not least here, what I would love for RIP IQ4. I know. I hear you. I know that transition from IQ4 to IQ5 has been a pain, a royal, glorious pain for a lot of offices. So solidarity to those who have soldiered through it. And then if you're comfortable, I would love to just hear some initial starting points for how does your team think about structuring your case notes? How do you train your new people for case notes? You'll have to just share anyone. And again, please feel free to unmute yourself if you don't want to share it in Menti, but just any kind of initial starting point observations to ground us as we get started here.
I guess one of the main and obvious ones for our office would be, oh, hi, everyone. I'm Victoria from the Office of Congressman Glenn Ivey. And one of the main ones for our office would be one, separating everything by their individual case or agency, rather, subject area. So we have folks who handle Social Security, IRS, and the different intersectionalities between the agencies. And then from there, we have our all staff meetings, or our district office all staff, and then all staff with everyone so that we can make sure we're all on the same page before we provide that information to the congressman.
Love it. Super helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Victoria. And that also raises, again, I want to kind of talk through the challenges here because I want to just emphasize this is a hard problem to solve. This is a really hard problem for every caseworker, every casework team, that there is so much richness that's possible to pull out of casework. And then the specifics for what you need are really going to vary between different types of cases, different agencies. So like this is a hard thing to teach. This is a hard thing to do. It is a hard thing to manage. So I just want to recognize the incredibly hard work and the skill that goes into all this for everyone here. Okay, we see someone joined and said caseworkers document every contact with a constituent, phone, email, in person, all into Indigov so that anyone who speaks with the constituent is up to date. Hugely important. And yes, that is another aspect of how complex this is, that there are multiple inputs that all need to be tracked within the same CRM. Someone else says building a casework guide as I learn. Props to you. That is so important for teams to be able to kind of be doing this institutional knowledge building as they go on. So topics are divided among the casework team, calls, emails in and out, all captured in IQ. Huge. And we're going to talk definitely a lot here about why that thoroughness is really, really important. And then someone says, they're the only caseworker. Oh my gosh, I want to just like send you virtual hugs and solidarity for being the only. That's a huge job to handle by yourself. So if there's something I need the ledge team or the DD or the LC or LA to know, I tag them. Hugely important. That coordination between casework and the rest of the teams. Yeah, and that's a huge, again, part of keeping those good notes. And then someone says using CRM, documenting interaction, weekly report shared with the member. Yeah, we're going to talk about how those reports and kind of those opportunities to share casework data with other parts of your team can be really important for habit building. Super important. Highlight trends, top case trends we're going to talk about a lot. Ananda, I'm going to put you on the spot to talk a lot about the importance of trends. And then summarizing, copying, pasting, email correspondence, huge. And then notes from agency liaisons. Awesome. Folks, this is really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing. Definitely already seeing some best practices and again, highlighting some of those challenges. So with that, let's switch back over to my slides and then let's dive into the rest of this presentation here. But again, folks, let me just reemphasize, especially if you're joining, this part is being recorded, but please, we want this to be an informal discussion. Hop in, unmute yourself, ask questions, provide suggestions. This is a group learning opportunity for everyone. So let's talk about actually how to decompose and think about the full spectrum of casework data and everything that is being captured. So when you're thinking about casework, the kind of pastoral care element of casework, that's the relationship and the trust between you and the constituent, that exists in your heart, that exists in the constituent's heart, that exists in whatever they choose to do with that information going forward, making you a better caseworker, making them a more engaged, informed, involved citizen. That's fabulous. Everything else is data, and everything else is record keeping. And as we said, there is a huge amount of the different types of records that are involved in casework. A huge variation in the types of information that you need to adequately keep those records to be able to do good casework. So this can be a little bit chaotic, especially getting your feet under you as a new caseworker and a new casework team. And all of that, those different types of information are used in different ways. So when I am thinking about this, I am thinking about casework data and case notes as falling into really three buckets for what they tell us about a case. I'll say these buckets are a little bit squishy. Again, casework is messy, so the data that comes out of casework is also messy. Some things don't fit perfectly into each category. But what we're going to talk through today, the structure for us to talk through today and how I think about this is three. Categorical for kind of what type of case is this? This is quantitative, this is multiple choice data. Chronological, that's the narrative. So what did we as an office do in this case? What happened in this case after it came to us, before it came to us, and then after it came to us? And then the qualitative, and this is kind of what makes any individual case different from any other case within your caseload. Is there anything I'm missing here? Any like big sources of data that you're like, where does that fit that I don't have up here? Hearing none. All right, maybe I got most of it. So thinking about how to define these, I think it's important to think about who would use this and in which situations would you use this? So your categorical. Has everyone gotten a question or a request from their comms team for the end of year report saying, we need numbers. Every other congressional office is putting out these big fancy like graphics about we handled X thousand numbers of cases and we brought in X tens of millions of dollars. Like that's the kind of quantitative categorical information that you're going to be pulling for them. Again, this is stuff tracked in your CRM as multiple choice options, choosing an agency from a dropdown, or the numbers. How many dollars were we able to recover in this particular case? And then, as we said, the chronological, this is your notes. I think some people talked about documenting, making sure that you document every interaction involved a constituent's case. That's what comes here. So this is if your boss says, I ran into John Q. Public at a town hall and he said, your team didn't do enough for me. What did we do in this case? This is the information you're going to use to build that answer. And then lastly is the qualitative. And the qualitative is going to be squishiest. We'll talk more about this in a second. But the way that I think about qualitative is a couple of things. And the biggest of them is if, for whatever reason, you have to transfer a case between two different caseworkers, what's the kind of detail information about that constituent, about who they are, and again, the specifics of this particular case that they're going to need to be able to build trust. And again, we'll talk about all of these categories more in depth here. And then talking about the why of this data. So this is really for my casework managers in particular, but again, I think for everyone who is involved in keeping case notes, it's really important taking the step back and asking, well, what is this information used for? Is really critical and for understanding just what's helpful to capture and what format is helpful to capture, and also really importantly, what's not helpful to capture. So again, for that categorical, as a casework manager, as a district director, as a chief of staff, as a member, this is the bird's eye view. What is the demand on my team? What is my team's capacity? What are the resources that I need? So having really clear and accurate case notes really helps like those levels of management understand what do we need more of to help my caseworkers do what they're doing. And this is where we're going to pull Ananda back in, but this is also where Congress as a whole has an opportunity to learn from casework as well. And again, chronological, we've talked a little bit about how those records back you up when a case is contested. And then qualitative, again, this is where you and your team, beyond just the being able to transfer cases well, this is also where and how your team learns. So the categories that we track in categorical don't just show up on their own. The CRMs don't just put them in because the CRMs think that those are good things to track. Those those categorical categories come from caseworkers and casework teams learning through casework and saying, this is how it makes sense for me to figure out. This is how it makes sense for me to divide my caseload by categories. So the qualitative is also really important for just someone talked about developing a case guide as they're learning, that is qualitative learning. Excuse me. Qualitative learning that helps your team do better casework down the road. Does that make sense? Questions, comments, any other uses for casework data that we haven't talked about yet? And I can't see you if you have a hand raised, so again, feel free to just jump on in. Cool. All right. That door is still open. And then I know, again, especially for my casework managers, but for anyone who has taken on cases, we see the importance of case notes kind of through some of the horror stories about where they go wrong, right? So I definitely had some of these as a caseworker and a casework manager when someone transferred me a case that didn't have the information I needed. But the most extreme example of this that I've seen was, again, in this role where I'm working at POPVOX Foundation, I sat down with a district director just to talk to her about her caseload and her casework operations and, what could we learn? How could we better support her? And she told me about when her team either fired a caseworker or he left very suddenly of his own accord. And she, recognized that there were cases that he was working that she had to figure out. And she said, and I opened IQ and I went into the cases that were tagged with him and there was nothing. There was just nothing. There were no records. There were no contact information. He didn't even have the Privacy Act release forms. He just kept them all in his email or on paper folders on his desk. So there was nothing. And I think, and I'm so sorry if this is really triggering for anyone who's been through something similar, but you see the problems, right? Where there's nothing that this state's district director was able to do, but go back to the constituents and go back to the agencies to say, kind of come hat in hand, say, we screwed up. What did we do for you? Is there anything else that you need done? Yes, and thank you so much for the good note in the chat about the notes are helpful to determine which agencies are most useful, most commonly contacted, and which are efficient in their responses. Super, super helpful point too. Yeah, for that big picture learning. So again, case notes are great on the learning. They're great on the big picture understanding, but then at that level of an individual constituent, just making sure we avoid those horror stories. And I know that that might bring up some some past trauma for folks. So I want to take a second. Let's go back to Mentimeter. If there's anything folks want to share about your worst casework nightmares, and then let's talk a little bit about some of those challenges in keeping good case notes and what are the hard parts about keeping good case notes here. So again, if you have not already joined the Menti, that QR code is over there, and it's also menti.com 356054443. Man, I'd just love to know. Again, keeping case notes is hard. We've talked about some of the things that make it hard. So for your just what are those biggest challenges? I know for us, when I was a caseworker or casework manager, a huge issue was turnover. Just caseworkers don't historically, traditionally, I know we have some 10 plus year veterans here. Caseworkers historically don't stay very long. It's a tough job. We would all love to see caseworkers get paid more than they currently are. But that makes it really difficult to keep caseworkers. And so having to retrain caseworkers every time someone leaves, that can create some of that inconsistency with just different habits being built among different people for sure.
And then also, you mentioned different habits.
Yeah.
People communicate differently, they take notes differently, and they also receive criticisms, or I don't even say criticisms, but just constructive criticisms differently. So that communication between staffers, like you mentioned, turnover, but also just while folks are in the office and working together, the way I might communicate a note or something that happened to me with an agency and or a constituent might not be received a certain way by another staffer. So making sure we're all on the same page there is definitely, I wouldn't say an issue, but something to be on top of.
Yeah, Victoria, really, really good point. I've absolutely seen this in practice for sure. When you're right, just different people pull out two people could hear the same conversation and hear totally different things for what's important to pull out. So it's just a huge challenge for consistency. Oh, yes. Okay. Seeing some really good points here. So time sensitive issues. So if you are having one of those days where you're just never off the phone, it is really tough to actually take that time to write down what you heard. Absolutely. And then, yes, when when the subject matter caseworker is out of the office, who else understands what she needs to know for that specific caseload, that specific agency? Yeah. And if I write notes just for me, no one would understand them. I relate to this so hard. It can be, yeah. And especially I think when we think about maybe two different buckets of challenges when you're a new caseworker, figuring out what's important, and then when you're an established caseworker, like kind of decomposing those skills for yourself to say, I know how to write this note so that I will understand it. But then, as you said, if someone else needs to read this, ugh, that's going to be a little tougher. Cool. Okay. Just to keep it moving here, I am super curious if you had to rank some of the common challenges that I hear from offices on keeping good case notes, which are the hardest, which are the biggest challenges, biggest obstacles? Is there anything that we're missing here? I'd also be super curious in particular to hear from folks who may have switched offices and have used multiple CRMs. I'd love to hear any experience you're willing to share on handling the different CRM features. Oh, time. Yep, hear that. Remembering and typing up details, absolutely. We just talked about that. Oh, and that's coming in as the top one here. Focus and getting to finish a convo. Yep, so time and focus and remembering kind of all tied up together. The different note styles across the team. Yeah, absolutely. We've just talked about this. CRM features, sounds like those are coming up. Again, if folks have anything they'd love to share, I would love to learn more from you about how that's impacted the way you take notes and then clear guidance. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, someone said our tag system is a mess. Man, again, I feel that in my bones. That was a consistent challenge for us. Absolutely. Okay, so we're remembering, typing up those details, focus, time, changed our tag system and getting everyone on the same page. Yes, we went through that as well. And we're going to talk about that, especially in our section talking about those categorical cases with Ananda. So please stay tuned. Whoever said when you changed your tag system, that has been a mess. I'd love to pull that experience out in particular. Yeah, okay. So again, remembering typing up details, focus, and time. And I think and then the note styles. I think a huge part of addressing that time focus remembering bucket of issues is really that consistency. And like we talked about, it's distilling what's important from a case and figuring out what's not important so you can be as efficient as possible in making those notes, putting in those notes. Cool. Okay. Thanks everyone so much for playing on that one. And then let's go back over presentation. We'll keep it rolling. All right, I've teased and previewed this so much. I'm excited to actually get into it, but let me do a tiny bit of setup here. So, as we said, we have Ananda Bhatia from House Digital Services today to talk about the project they are working on, the Case Compass project. That is, again, only on the House side for now. My Senate folks, I want to tell you, bless you, we love you. We're going to be a little bit House centric here for the next few minutes, but hopefully that won't be the case forever. You know, it is ledge branch approach season as we speak, and maybe we'll see some groundwork laid for this project to happen over on the Senate as well. Who knows? Stay tuned, watch this space. Who knows? But I will say the chance to kind of work with, to observe the way Ananda and her team have approached this project and the research that they've done to make this project come to life in the last few years has been really interesting and helpful for me in, again, approaching this big picture question of what is important to capture in case notes, what information is there in case notes, and what can we learn from it if we have this opportunity to put it into aggregate. So the backstory here for Case Compass, and I'll jump in if it's helpful, but I'll just do the super brief 10,000 foot view, is that this was originally a recommendation from the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress, who said, you know, we understand there is such rich data in individual offices' caseloads that tells us things about what's going on with federal agencies, what's going on with specific programs, even specific processing centers within programs that we just can't see because it's siloed in individual offices. So ModCom and now the Modernization Subcommittee for the Committee on House Administration tasked HDS with developing a data aggregator that does some very cool tech stuff, but it pulls data from these CRMs from offices that opt in. It's a pilot group of offices, bipartisan pilot group of offices opting in now. And then that program uses machine learning to accurately tag to pull out that raw unstructured data and then assign standardized case tags to it. And Ananda has really been doing extraordinary work to figure out what that data scheme should be, and then what does accuracy in tagging look like. And there are two kind of customers here, but the one is congressional offices individually. Being able to baseline your team's casework against national averages just clearly has huge potential utility for offices in figuring out, are we doing what's going on in our district, in our state? And then also incredible work here, potential data and output here for policy and oversight staff as well. That again, we'd all love to see policy and oversight staff have more access and have more interest in the insights that come out of casework. So, Ananda, with all of that set up, let me stop sharing. If you want to take it forward and tell us more about Case Compass and the data scheme.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really interesting to hear from folks about what their current challenges are. I worked in a member office with Anne, but was always on the DC side, so I never did casework myself. I've always had a huge appreciation for how important the work is and how difficult the work is. But just that appreciation has grown exponentially since I've started really digging into just how complicated all of the issues are across the federal government and how much information you need to retain in order to solve constituents' really difficult and complicated issues. So to build this aggregator that we're piloting right now, the first thing that we had to do was create a standardized taxonomy of basically the categories of every kind of casework across the federal government. Because if we want to compare apples to apples casework from your office, if you opt into the pilot, to the rest of the country or to everyone else in the pilot, but everyone tackles their cases completely differently, as we know. So in order to do that, we had to create our own system of tagging and match all of the cases that we were getting from other offices to our tagging. And that on its own took, a very long time. We worked with caseworkers to build this. Anne helped out quite a bit. Catherine Long, who's on this call, has been helping us out quite a bit. But long story short, it is up, it is published. And let's see. You should be able to see kind of a prettier version of what the taxonomy looks like. We have this in a JSON format as well. It's all publicly available. But basically, for every federal agency, we broke casework down into multiple tiers. So you can expand and collapse these different agencies and see all the different types of casework that we've identified as most common or that caseworkers have seen in the past within kind of like the second sub-agency level all the way down to the specific issue. So I'm happy to drop the link to this. Um, Folks are welcome to, again, use it, share feedback on it. But also, if you are thinking about updating your own internal tagging system and doing some tag cleaning and are wondering, what are we missing or what are other offices doing? We hope that this might be a useful standard or place to kind of go off of. But one of the other challenges we've had is so we created the tagging system. We have our list of categories, but then in order to um, put that into a dashboard that folks can actually see, we need to tag all of those cases according to this taxonomy. So what we've done is for the offices that are in the pilot now, we've been able to match all of the existing tags in your CMS if you use Fireside, Indigo, or IQ. We're working with all three of those vendors. We're matching that to our taxonomy, and we're able to show those trends based on things that caseworkers have tagged on their own, because we know those are going to be the most accurate because you already tagged it yourself, the experts for tagging it. What we want to do is add in, and we are working on layering in AI to do the tagging for anything that is missing so that people don't have to go in and do additional hand tagging. But certainly it's useful. The more data and more information that we have from you all as the caseworkers, the easier it is for us to do. So the best case scenario is every caseworker already tags everything to a granular level. And then we're able to show all that info in the dashboard immediately, no problem. And then the second best case scenario is if we need to use AI to determine what category a case is in, the more details we have in the notes, the more information we have, the easier it is for us to actually do the tagging ourselves. Which of course we know can be time consuming, but I will say, if anything is better than nothing, one sentence is better than zero sentences, a few words is better than nothing. So the more info we have, the better. But I'd love to really quickly show the dashboard itself so you can get a sense of what Case Compass is and the benefits. Let me switch to this screen. So this is an example of an office that I'm mirroring so that you'd be able to see, again, my office trends compared to the rest of the countries. You're able to see overall past cases over the last different time periods, 3 months, 6 months, year, 5 years. You can change this chart to different agencies or specific issues and drill down. So right now I'm seeing all casework. My office's trends compared to the national average. You can click in, like DHS is the number one right now for the last year for this office. If you click into DHS, you'll see those trend lines. So this office looks like is having a lot more DHS cases than the rest of the country is on average, which is interesting. And then you can drill down further into sub-agencies, and click on ICE or CPB and see what those trend lines look like. This is what I really wanted to show folks is the difference between what a difference tagging can make and how much richer and more interesting this data could be. Right now, again, we're only showing things that caseworkers tagged on their own. So for everyone in our working group, you can see there's, for the last year, DHS, we've got the most cases, 1,300, and we've got about 15 offices in the working group for people's knowledge. But we've got 2,000 that are in other because most of them, the majority of cases still aren't tagged at all. And those numbers, the discrepancy is much higher when you get down to the specific inquiry or problem level. We only have 52 cases that are tagged by a caseworker at a really granular level. We have 2,000 that are not tagged at all. Which again, we're hoping to, and we will be layering in AI to make up for the rest of that gap so that we can see more interesting trends. But the most accurate, of course, is always you all and your expertise. And then finally, we're showing turnaround time as well. Another one that's a little difficult to define because different folks have different definitions of when they choose to close out a case in their CRM. but we're showing across different agencies how many cases have been opened or closed over a certain amount of time, what that average turnaround time is, and then again, you're able to compare that to your office versus the national average to see if maybe there's a slower turnaround time for you compared to others for the VA. What's going on there? Is that an issue that you need to raise? Or is this like a nationwide problem that could be addressed with some better oversight? That's the intention behind the dashboard. So yeah, I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions. If folks, house side, unfortunately, only folks are interested in participating in the pilot, you can reach out to me and I'll drop my email too, and happy to give more in-depth info about what it means to join. But it's very simple. You just give us permission to access your data. There's no additional work on your end. You just give us the permission. We anonymize everything. So we're completely stripping out constituent PII. We're not seeing any of that info, and we're obviously not sharing that with anyone else. We're just showing those very high level trends, as you saw. And then if you sign up, we'll get access to your info so that we can put it in the dashboard, and then we'll give you access to the dashboard. But yeah, happy to answer questions or turn it back over to Anne if there's nothing.
Love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Ananda. And this has just been truly incredible work to watch this take shape. And again, for like the moments outside of DC where like those policy staff and administrative staff see the work that you do and see the like richness and complexity of the data and the agents, like the landscape for agencies that you all handle every day. Like that has been super validating to see folks look at Ananda's taxonomy and go, whoa, caseworkers handle all of this. So that's been super cool. Any questions for Ananda before we move on to some best practices for those three categories?
Hey, and this is Emily from Congresswoman Escobar's office. Just wondering, like, where you see this going as it continues, and like what opportunities you're excited about, for what it means for congressional.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I see so much potential for what this could be and how offices could use it. I mean, our biggest stumbling block right now is making sure that we actually have more cat tagged information in the dashboard. So we're really prioritizing again either getting better data from casework, using our AI models to do a better job at tagging, which we've made a ton of progress on recently. So I think those numbers will improve quite a bit. But then the biggest next step is to just expand to other offices. Right now, we've got 15 in the working group. The vision was always for it to be the entire house, so you could see nationwide data. So 15 to 400 plus, we've got a little bit of a ways to go there, but it's obviously more impactful to see the trends of my office compared to 400 instead of my office compared to 15. But the potential for what this can mean, the biggest thing we're doing is working with caseworkers and ledge staff as we're building it. It's how we build all of our products. So we have got working group meetings every 6 weeks where we show different versions of the dashboard, and incorporate that feedback and see what is useful for folks. So the turnaround time table, for example, that was direct feedback we got from the working group. Like this is the kind of info that would be helpful for us to see. We've also heard geographic trends. People really want to see a map of where are their hotspots on different types of casework. So that's something that we've been exploring. But the vision is really that it's not just useful for caseworkers, in order to see, this is a problem I'm facing. Who else could I reach out to? What other places are experiencing similar issues, and can we work together? But also for legislative staff and personal offices, and then committee staff to be able to have access to. So if you're doing oversight of the VA, that you'd be able to prep for a hearing with better data that's directly from members on that committee. Like these are the trends that I'm seeing from my constituents. Or, when I think some of the best offices are the ones that are able to translate constituent correspondence and casework directly into their letter writing and their policy making. And so I have grand visions of, could we show trends in emerging casework in the dashboard somehow and use AI tools to do that? Or could we extract particular stories or instances where it seems like there might be, a bigger problem that needs to be solved at the federal level? Like, could we show examples of ideas that might turn into policy? I think there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, really good question. The last thing I'll say here on that question that we've heard from particularly committee staff who focus on oversight is that this has an extraordinary potential as kind of a counter to exec branch official data, that this is an independent source of real-time performance data that an agency can't manipulate in any way. So I know some of us who've been around for a while remember a whole host of scandals with the VA manipulating like constituent wait, like veteran waiting times for specific appointments. Like this is the kind of thing that I think we're really excited about as a counterbalance to that. That when the agency is saying, well, we've dropped our waiting time by XYZ, or we've dropped, the time that it takes for a veteran to get through whatever process by 20%, like caseworkers be able to come in and say, well, according to our national data, like, yes, good job, you're doing it fabulous, but we're not quite there yet. So I think that's really exciting. A good question. Awesome. Ananda, thank you again for joining us and for all of this hard work. Let me get back to my screen here, and we will carry right along. Okay, so again, for me, and getting the opportunity to kind of watch this process up close, again, the big takeaways are that simplicity is really key. I am a maximalist when it comes to writing notes. We talked about different communication styles. I want to write down and capture everything. But this has actually been a really interesting exercise. And again, on that categorical side of saying what's important. It's important to understand the agency. It's important to understand the program. Again, all these programs having different rules. And then important to just have a really clear sense of the problem. So that's been really interesting. And then again, part of this to that question of where does this go next is that, the CRMs that we use and the technology that is available to caseworkers today is not static. This will change. Ananda and her team are really at the cutting edge of thinking about machine learning and AI tools for speeding up this and standardizing the data collection process. Like there are changes to this technology coming. So I think offices that think really hard about getting consistent now and getting thorough now will be in a better position to take advantage of those tools when they're available. It's definitely some really interesting stuff coming here. Okay, so thinking about distilling. So what is most important to capture? Some of you have already raised this for these 3 different categories, but let's just go through quickly some best practices and some tips for making sure that you stay consistent for these. So like we've just talked about, we're going to go in order, but categorical, chronological, and qualitative. So it can definitely be a challenge to take a big, messy record of a constituent's intake, whether that's a voicemail that came in, that's an initial email, that's a request that comes through your digital Privacy Act release form, that's notes from a walk-in, whatever it can be. But again, thinking about in my case notes, if someone who's never seen this case before, were to look over my shoulder, what's just categorically, what are the things that we need to understand this case? So again, Ananda's talked about really coming down to that agency, program, and problem framing. And the other thing that I always really recommend for offices is as you're looking at cases, as you're setting up a case, especially on intake, is making sure that every case has a super, super, super clear 1-sentence summary at the top. Again, helpful for consistency, helpful for training a new caseworker and understanding just this is what I have to capture. And then also, like Ananda talked about a little bit long-term, right now Case Compass is just pulling on those tags, but as the technology develops, as the program develops, it will eventually start reading more of the unstructured data. So again, being really clear, even if your CRM doesn't have the capacity to do this kind of detailed tagging where you can capture agency, program, and problem, still having that clearly laid out in the case description will still let you pull that data out long term. So again, this 1-sentence summary, I have it under categorical here, but I think it's good to think about what are you capturing for all three of those categories here. Are you capturing the categorical? Do you have the agency? Do you have as much as you know about the program? And then what is showing up on the problem? What do you know so far on the problem? And then also the key dates. Are there anything here that is going to impact the steps you're going to take in this case going forward? And then that qualitative, just what is the constituent's expectation? If you're going to start pulling that intake, that voicemail into an agency inquiry, what's going to be the key information, again, that makes this case different that you're going to need to pull into that agency letter? Make sense? Questions? Cool. Okay. And then let's talk about habits. So some of you talked about maybe a little bit, how do you stay on top of these? Couple things that I have definitely heard from offices make this a lot easier. And the first is, so some folks here talked about their weekly internal meeting, their weekly all staff meeting, building this kind of thing in as a standing team activity. Again, can be really helpful for consistency and also really helpful for kind of that group teaching, caseworkers teaching each other what is our team's standard for case notes and what is our team's standard for case tagging here. So one thing I've heard of some teams doing is just in that weekly casework team meeting, district office team meeting, just pulling up the list of these are all of our new cases that came in and doing a quick check. Do they have the tags that we track for our office? And are they accurate? Do they look accurate here? So again, building these habits into the regular routines that you already have going. You might also do this for closed cases and running a report every week or every month. These are all the cases that we closed this week. Are they all tagged? Can I tell what they all are? Do these tags look accurate? Another big thing here. So I know someone flagged in the Mentimeter that to switch to a new tag system, and that's been a pain. I know it's a pain and it's an extraordinarily difficult, time-intensive process, but it can also be incredibly helpful. So I know, Ananda, jump in here if you have other insights, but you and I have talked about some of the challenges looking at offices' caseloads. I will say IQ is especially hard for this because you can create so many case tags in IQ. A lot of this means that you may have multiple duplicative tags in there. So you might have 14 different tags that all kind of mean Social Security. So then that makes it a lot harder when you're trying to pull a report out to say, how many Social Security cases do I have open? Have we historically had open? Having that huge swath of case tags is going to make that really difficult. Again, this does not have to be a crazy job for one person. This can be part of team professional development and team building. Let's do 10 minutes of retagging our cases, of looking at tags to see what can we get rid of in a standing team meeting. I will also say too, as a former casework manager, this was one of the things I loved to do when I had a talented young caseworker who there's a chance they're going to take over from me one day. I want to keep them involved. I want to keep them learning. I want to give them opportunities for development and growth. This is a great task to offload to someone to figure out. And caseworkers, this is a great task to ask for if you want those professional development, leadership opportunities, for someone to really think about casework in that big manager, eagle eye view way. And then also back tagging is also a great intern task. So if you've switched to a new caseload or new casework tag system and you want to go back and historically retag your cases so that you have that data, great job for your interns on a slow day. That's a good make work. So actually helpful make work task. Okay, chronological. I'm gonna go a little bit quickly here, because again, I think from what we were talking about at the beginning, you guys know these. You know how important this is. But again, just to emphasize the stakes for chronological, I think we've all had this happen or seen it happen in our caseloads. When you get a call from your comms director and says, hi, the Cleveland Plain Dealer is going to run a story or is researching a story on how your team does casework. And they have this constituent who says, you didn't do anything. What did you actually do? Or someone talked about using those chronological records to tell which agencies are responsive. This is also where that chronological is really helpful. If you have consistent enough records that you can pull back and say, hey, the Boston VBA has not been responsive to our cases, that's the information that your team needs to escalate that for oversight. So really, really important. And again, thinking of those two use cases, I think is helpful for figuring out what is important to capture. I love a checklist. And so one thing I've seen offices do, and that I think is really smart, is especially for new caseworkers or folks who don't do casework often, literally having a teeny printout that you can stick by someone's monitor that says, when you're on the phone with an agency, when you're on the phone with a constituent, this is the important stuff that you need to capture out of that conversation. And just go through and tick it off. Do I have the method of contact? Do I have the date? Do I have the accurate name, agency, or constituent's full name? Constituent, I know that's the right person for the case. Do I have that written down? Do I have the next steps? Do I have action items? Do I have a date? One thing I love is actually for offices that work and caseworkers who work with the Taxpayer Advocate Service. They do a great, some of you know, loving Taxpayer Advocate Service is like my whole personality. But they do such a good job here of actually doing this on the phone with you in a way that's helpful for caseworkers to emulate too. Saying, hey, here's my name, here's my contact info, I'm calling for this case, here's what's going on, here's the date when I will contact you next, here's what I need from you. Beautiful model. Again, checklists are your friends. I would really recommend it. And this is something that your team needs to figure out. What do you want to capture for each of these methods of intake? Email. Someone talked, Catherine, I think you flagged in the chat, like the complicated, annoying business of having to paste of your CRM and your email not talking to each other and having to copy and paste through. Sending through your CRM, if you guys have your CRM set up to do that, is super, super helpful. I really recommend it. But where it's not possible, again, I'm a maximalist. Your team's mileage may vary, but I really love just pasting in that email. So you have all the metadata. You're not summarizing, worried you missed something out. It's all there. Especially again, thinking about case transfer. If someone else were to take this case off of your plate, out of your caseload, knowing that they have that full correspondence record is going to be a huge help. And we talked about phones. And then I actually would love to hear from folks if you have a standard process for naming your documents and handling documents and putting them into your CRM. But again, for thinking about a checklist for your interns as they're uploading your documents, as they're uploading stuff that comes in by mail or fax, if you still do faxes or whatever, again, a checklist is really helpful. And then again, I think there are some habits that I've heard offices use that really make this easier. And the one where I'd really love to highlight is I think someone talked about it here a little bit, but it's talking about comms and working with your comms team to learn how to kind of tell a casework story in a way that's succinct, deep, but thorough, and it works for someone who doesn't know casework. So there are a few offices. I'm just pulling these almost at random from the work that I do to develop our casework newsletter. But these are two offices that I've really seen they have a structured process for sharing individual constituent stories and casework stories on their websites. This is really helpful. So it's helpful for your comms team. Always good to have good stories to share with them. But more importantly, learning how to do this and developing this habit is also what's going to help you learn how to do good chronological record keeping. If you're used to going back through a case that you've closed or you're about to close or whatever stage it may be to say, I need to learn how to tell this story. What are the key points quickly? That's the kind of use case that helps you refine your process for what do you need to be keeping track of here. Anyone have a good process for this? Anything else that's helpful for folks to flag or share? File naming. I know. Yes. So Catherine has a really good standard here for file naming that I would love to hear if other folks have similar things. Catherine suggests last name, agency, type of doc, and date. Yeah, we did. We send a media release. Oh, Pamela talks about a media release coming into CRM. That's beautiful. Yeah, love that. Well done. Cool. All right, we're gonna keep it moving here. And then last but not least is the qualitative. And I will take any opportunity to share a photo of my dog, but there is a reason for it, which is I think we've all had one of these moments in a case transfer where like showing a constituent that you remember who they are on a personal level and not just, and Meeker, Social Security benefits, eligibility delay. It was really, really important for that trust building. And I remember one that's going to be in my head for the rest of my life, which is I picked up a case for a veteran, and the case notes that someone had left me weren't perfect, but there was just this one little note in the case description that this woman rescued German Shepherds. And she was not happy about the transfer in our office and her former caseworker leaving and me coming in, and then I am not a veteran, and it was a whole thing. But being able to work into that conversation, like, by the way, I have this crazy note, like, tell me about your German Shepherds, was like the key to this woman just opening up and actually being like, oh, your team keeps good records. If you have the note on my German Shepherds, then you probably have the note on whether this case was a nod or a Q and when is my BVA hearing and what else is going on here. So like, this is the kind of qualitative data that's really important to keep, but it is really, really going to vary between offices on what is your practice for keeping this? How much do you emphasize it? I'll say we measure what we value. So this is like a mentorship leadership opportunity within offices saying we care about this kind of thing and we value this kind of data and therefore it is important to capture. And then, casework manager setting the example, this is how I would capture it. That is absolutely going to be critical within offices. Learning what's valuable, this is the kind of thing you build up over time. And so especially for the new folks, and as possible, I think erring on the side of maximalism, your records are not FOIA-able. right? Like constituent is not going to see, you should always be professional in your case notes, but a constituent's not going to see what you put in there. There is no opportunity in the world where they're going to find that. So erring on the side of let me include this detail, I don't know if it's going to be helpful in the future, but in case it is, this is going to be critical, I think is the best way forward there. But also, just as we're talking about how our office is learning from your caseloads, some of that qualitative, and this is something qualitative researchers actually train people to do, is pattern recognition. So as you're working on cases and you see something that's like a repeated phrase across multiple agency staff, or when you hear something from an agency staffer that notes, hey, this is how our process is, but we actually do it like this, or I'm going to tell you I'm going to do it this way. That's a really interesting thing to be paying attention to for that kind of qualitative learning. And again, up to your office how you track that. That's going to be really vary between offices. But I just want to introduce that for folks and thinking about that as data, that this stuff is really important. This is the important part of your work as caseworkers being understood and respected by your policy staff, by your comp staff, by the rest of your team, of being able to pull out, like, this is my expertise. This is the unique perspective on how agencies work, how the law is implemented that I bring to this conversation. Super important. Okay. So let me pause there because that's the main part of everything here. We have a couple minutes left where I will stop recording in a minute if folks have questions that they want to raise without being recorded. But again, we've really talked about some of these key things about thinking about casework data in these three categories. The categorical itself, with Ananda's presentation, helping us think about agency, program, and problem, about really distilling that down. This is my one sentence goal. The chronological, the importance of keeping thorough records here, and our qualitative, of figuring out what's important for your office, what's important for your caseload, and then what's the best way to track that from there.